Therefore, please try to be precise and concise. Yes, please. Please use the microphone. Bando, Mainichi Shimbun newspaper, Your Excellency, welcome. Thank you very much for coming to our press club. The hot topic, the South China Sea. I would like to ask a question. First, former President, Ashton Carter, Secretary of Defense Carter, he has appealed to all the countries about the reclamation, and he has asked for immediate halt of the reclamation to all the relevant countries. In the Spratlys, one of the airport, there is a plan to repair. According to the plan, would the repair of the airport be conducted? I would like to ask that question, a relevant question. Quite often, a spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry of China calls themselves a major power in the world, and to the Philippines and to others, they often say that smaller countries like your country, which is very rude for you, should not meddle. What do you think about the comments of the spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry? Thank you.
We shouldn't, I'm sorry, the last portion of the questions, we shouldn't meddle.
The spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry says smaller countries should not cause messes or should not meddle up the situation. It is a very rude comment to smaller countries. What do you think?
Well, perhaps we should utilize their own words. In 2002, in an attempt to manage tensions within this area of the world, ASEAN and its dialogue partner China tried to come up with a code of conduct. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful, so they came up with the Declaration of Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. This was signed by all parties concerned, and we assume that it is still binding on all parties concerned. And in fact, in all of the fora, all parties say they still adhere to the DOC and look forward to the formulation of the COC. May I quote the declaration, paragraphs 2, 4, and 5 in particular. And may I quote paragraph 2, the parties are committed to exploring ways for building trust and confidence in accordance with the above-mentioned principles on the basis of equality and mutual respect. I assume even if we are a much smaller economy and a non-existent military entity and a smaller country, be it in land area and population, equality also refers to the Philippines. Paragraph 4, the parties concerned undertake to resolve their territorial and jurisdictional disputes by peaceful means without resorting to the threat or use of force through friendly consultations and negotiations by sovereign states directly concerned in accordance with universally recognized principles of international law, including the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And fifth, the parties undertake to exercise self-restraint in the conduct of activities that would complicate or escalate disputes and affect peace and stability, including, among others, refraining from action of inhabiting on the presently uninhabited islands, reefs, shoals, cays, and other features, and to handle their differences in a constructive manner. So perhaps we should request the spokesperson to revisit the declaration on the conduct of parties in the South China Sea to refresh his memory to that which they pledged to. And the other aspect is something that we have often stated, perhaps in more private discussions. We were taught when we were younger that the ability to come to an agreement sometimes necessitates, or a lot of times necessitates, you're putting yourself in the other's shoes. Look at it from their other perspective. If the situation were reversed, would they accept not meddling in their, if China's and the Philippines' position were reversed, would they accept the advice that they are now telling countries as small as ours? Thank you. With regards to, I think we have delayed our repair of the landing strip that services our community within the Calayan Island groups. The delay of the repair makes all the repairs even that much more extensive down the line. This facility existed before 2002, and that is important because there was an agreement to preserve the status quo starting from 2002. Now, when certain countries say everybody is reclaiming at this point in time. The Philippines vehemently denies that we are reclaiming anything at this point in time, nor are we even repairing that which already existed before these agreements were entered into.
Tim Kelly from Reuters. The agreement that you had yesterday with the Japanese Prime Minister, you talked about the transfer of defense technology. One of the things that wasn't in there that some people had expected was perhaps that you would start talks on a visiting forces agreement. As Japan kind of extends its defense footprint, there has been talk about them doing maritime patrols in the South China Sea, possibly air patrols, possibly more naval activity there. If they do that, one of the things that perhaps Japan would want would be to be able to refuel aircraft in the Philippines, or perhaps use naval bases for supplies or refueling of naval vessels. Is that something that the Philippines would welcome and facilitate for Japan if Japan requested that? And would you need to have a visiting forces agreement for that to happen?
Well, it was discussed yesterday during our summit meeting with the Prime Minister that the relevant entities now will start discussions leading up to a visiting forces agreement. Now, the visiting forces agreement will have to be passed and approved by our Senate. But we will be starting discussions on all of the details embodied in this. Currently, the Philippines only has 2 visiting forces agreements, one with the United States of America, and the most recently passed has been the one with Australia. We welcome this development. We have only 2 strategic partners, the U.S. and Japan. And again, as I have stated previously, it does not behoove a good partnership or relationship if you're not able to work at interoperability with the other. An agreement that even for humanitarian concerns that exists only in paper will not be effective when there comes a time that you would need to be in coordination and in cooperation or in joint operation with your strategic partners. So yes, the Philippines does welcome this development, and we will be initiating all of the diplomatic requirements to come up with a visiting forces agreement.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. The next question, please. Kyodo News, my name is Sugita. In the case of the Philippines, in the past, there was the U.S. forces. Clark, Subic were there, but in the 1990s, they were removed. And because partly of that impact in the South China Sea, China is becoming extremely active. There are such analysis by some experts. Your Excellency, you mentioned about strategic partner with regard to your relation with the United States. Your relationship with the U.S., like in the past, a mutual defense alliance type of relationship, just like the U.S.-Japan relationship as of now. Is there any possibility to upgrade your bilateral relationship with the U.S.? Do you have any wish to upgrade it to a stronger alliance-like relationship? As you know, Your Excellency, in the case of Japan, we have the U.S.-Japan alliance, the security alliance. The Senkaku Island is applicable. The United States is obliged to defend. U.S. President did make a public comment, and because of that, the defense policies has been made clear. But in the case of the Philippines, would you seek a stronger defense obligation of the United States, and therefore might you wish to upgrade and strengthen your bilateral relationship with the U.S.? Thank you.
Precisely where we have this new agreement called the acronym is EDCA for Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Our Constitution prohibits foreign bases in our country. But having said that, it does allow rotational presence. So EDCA envisions an increase of rotational presence to foster, again, interoperability and transfer of knowledge and perhaps technology between America and the Philippines. The Mutual Defense Treaty that exists between the Philippines and America started in 1951. There have been many clarifications as to exactly, for instance, the treaty talks about Pacific. So recently I questioned whether Pacific refers to that portion of the body of water which is on the eastern coast of the Philippines, and where the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea is not part of. And I was told that at the point in 1951 when they referred to Pacific, that is what we now refer to as Asia Pacific. And I understand exchanges of diplomatic notes throughout the decades have clarified all of these questions. So I guess EDCA is just a further refinement of a very strong and very long-lasting relationship between the Philippines and America. And we see this as an improvement in making those agreed upon terms in the various treaties and agreements that much more real. It doesn't exist just in paper, but it is an actual ability, again, to render support to each other. And it is, we have to emphasize, EDCA is not directed at any entity. It is just a refinement of a long-standing defense treaty between America and the Philippines. Thank you.
はい、どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Any other question? Yes, a person in the back. From Asahi Shimbun, my name is Shibata. Thank you for the conference. I have one question on your domestic issue. Next year, you will have presidential election. And when president changes in the Philippines, it seems that in many cases, the policies will dramatically change. For the government of Japan, the Aquino government is a very friendly government for us, so we have very good relationship. But when the government changes, there could be changes in policy vis-a-vis economy as well as vis-a-vis China. Now, for the ruling party, the candidate, Secretary Marurojas, according to the private sector survey, the popularity is not that high. The presidential election will occur in 1 year. At what timing would you designate your successor? Would you be designating your successor other than Secretary Rojas? Now, I understand that in the economic the clauses, would you also be changing political clauses for your revision of the Constitution? In that, is there a possibility that you will be able to once again run for presidency with the possible changes in the political clause for your Constitution?
Thank you for your very, very, very interesting questions. First things first. Regardless of who replaces me as president next year, Japan is our biggest trading partner. It is always within the top 2 or top 3 sources for official development assistance. Yesterday, we agreed with Prime Minister Abe through JICA very, very large projects, amongst them the revitalization of a train system that will cover the first province north of Metro Manila all the way to the southernmost portion of Luzon. This undoubtedly will spur quite a lot of economic activity and ease transportation for these communities. So the point I'm trying to raise is that I don't think our people will elect a foolhardy replacement that will suddenly throw away all of these very good economic partnerships that we have with Japan. Okay. Second, when will I endorse? I promised our people that I was hoping end of June, but now it seems that I have to, by law, deliver a State of the Nation address, which is the last Monday of July. And it will be shortly after that that I will endorse the person to our electorate, to our people, as the person I believe who can carry out the continuity. Now, changes in the Constitution to allow for a further term. In our history, we had the period of martial law. We had Mr. Marcos, who first got elected in 1965. He was authorized to have 2 terms that would have ended in 1973. And at the point in time when it was about to end, he imposed martial law, wherein he proceeded to rule our country up to 1986 when he was ejected by the EDSA revolution. We certain countries, like the South American countries, also went through a similar period. In their constitutions, a sitting president has to step down, but can rerun after the intervention of a different administration. Perhaps that is something that the Philippines can consider. So my answer to those who were espousing an extension of terms was, we will undoubtedly have benefits for having a government that will not have to relearn how to govern. But at the same time, we open the doors to somebody who might emulate Mr. Marcos and decide not to leave the office forever. And I think that is a very serious risk that our country, or my country, has to avoid. So I asked that we not consider reopening the Constitution for term limits. The present joint resolution being worked through by Congress and the Senate deals with economic provisions, and I have yet to see the contents of the same to see if I can join them in their proposal. I have to study that particular proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your speech. My name is Zhu Chao from China's Xinhua News Agency. I have two questions. The first one is, as you mentioned in the diet, that Japan has gone beyond fulfilling its obligation to heal the wounds of the past. But I then know that in your country, there are still plenty of comfort women who are waiting for justice and compensation from Japan. As one of them who has been to Tokyo told us that you was very aware of their issue when you was a congressman. How do you view this problem currently? The second one is regarding your speech in Nikkei. You mentioned that how do you think your words about nuts for China? Do you think it hurts Chinese people's feeling? Thank you.
Thank you. May I answer the first question? When I was a congressman, and I think it was here that I first heard of the issue of comfort women, our then Foreign Secretary or Minister for Foreign Affairs, I asked him about this particular issue. His response to me was that in our agreement with Japan covering reparations, this issue was supposed to have been tackled as far as the obligations of Japan relative to the Philippines. Now, last night I was asked by our own media, and I promised our media to find out all of the efforts that have been done to address the issue of the comfort women. As far as I'm concerned, they are our countrymen, and it is our responsibility to care for all of these comfort women. So I would want a review, and as soon as I get home, I want a report on all of the efforts that have been done for these compatriots of ours who suffered so unnecessarily during the war. Okay. With regards to hurting the Chinese feelings, we have no intentions of hurting anybody's feelings. In 2011, when I had a state visit to China, we did point out that the relationships between our country, if you look at it from an economic perspective, were very, very much in favor of China. For instance, in 2011, if I remember the figures correctly, China would send us 200,000 tourists a year. We sent China 800,000. The Philippines population has just reached 100 million. China's population is 1.3 billion at least. In terms of indirect investment, China provided about 600 million indirect investment in our economy. The Philippine corporations put in about $2.5 billion into the Chinese economy. And we proposed that stability is a very necessary component for prosperity, and prosperity seems to be the primary need or the primary mission of every government that exists in the world. So and the response by then President Hu Jintao was the disputes in the South China Sea should not be the be-all and end-all of our relationships. So throughout the years, we have not answered, for instance, all of the attacks on the Philippines by the media. We have tried to do our best to de-escalate the situation. We have promised to abide by international law, and that's why we went to arbitration, which is found as a means of resolving these disputes in UNCLOS. Scarborough Shoal which is where one of the major incidents happened between the Philippines and China, is within 120 miles of our coastline and therefore within our exclusive economic zone. Our fishermen today complain that they are no longer being allowed to fish. In this particular area, they are not allowed to even shelter in the quay during times of inclement weather. And I have had to mollify their feelings. I have had to ask them to exert more patience because we do not want to escalate the situation. We keep saying in various fora, hopefully we can concentrate our energies and efforts in growing our economies and making our people more prosperous. So one only has to look at the map. And I guess one of the questions we would like to ask the Chinese people were, if you were the Philippines and suddenly you would have one coastline, in effect, your whole west coast is gone, you will be retained with the east coast, would you say, yes, please take our half of our waterways? I don't think any country would willingly do that. So we are just standing up for our rights. We respect everybody else's rights. We ask that our rights also be respected. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Andy Sharp from Bloomberg. Following up from Tim's question, could you categorically state whether you would welcome Japanese patrols in the South China Sea? And a second question, given Washington's seemingly tougher stance on China in the South China Sea, do you think this is enough? And does this also bring with it a danger of a greater conflict in the region?
I would hope that all of us are students of history, and that I don't think anybody has been espousing going into violent actions with anybody. All of these comments by various entities, the G7 amongst them, ASEAN, and the European Union, and so on and so forth, gives us, in a sense, tremendous comfort in that this issue is not being ignored and is being consciously striven to resolve. That, again, is, I think, a very helpful development. Do we welcome Japanese patrols or joint patrols? These are international waters, and beyond the 200-mile, well, even the 200-mile economic zone guarantees rights of transit. Recently, we concluded a delimitation of maritime boundaries with Indonesia. And amongst the things that are now possible with Indonesia is that in the issue of protecting the environment or even anti-piracy operations, the Indonesian Navy and the Philippine Navy can patrol this very extensive area more thoroughly, in the sense that now that we know precisely where the boundaries are, we can take alternate patrols that will cover these areas closer to 24/7 than what is now possible. So again, perhaps at some point in time, the issues in the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, East Sea will be resolved, and that will enable everybody to be even more cooperative in addressing humanitarian disaster assistance needs, anti-piracy efforts, and so on and so forth. So we are hoping that perhaps the model that Indonesia and the Philippines are now doing in this part of the world can serve as an example of what is possible. Thank you. The U.S.'s statements. In whether tougher stance, I think they have been stating the same position from the get-go. They do not take sides, but at the same time, they are calling on all parties to respond, to be responsible. And they're doing their efforts, I think, to try and de-escalate any potential sources of conflict. They are also perhaps reminding everybody that there are norms of international behavior agreed upon by all parties or all nations of goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nimura, NHK, National Broadcasting Corporation. Peace and stability of the Philippines is what I would like to ask about. The Mindanao peace process. Initially, there were the plans, but it seems that there are some problems. Going forward, about the peace process going forward with the MILF, what is your observation? Sir, related to Mindanao in the Philippines, the extremist Islamic State, what is the threat level, if any, for foreigners, including Japanese nationals, in terms of the security of foreign nationals? Any threat level of the Islamic State in your country? If there is a threat, what might be the countermeasures, please? Thank you.
If I can answer the last portion of the question first. If you go to the internet, you will find pictures of Filipinos who claim to be members of IS. Our intelligence tells us that a lot of these people who are real terrorists were at one point in time claiming to be affiliates of Jamia Islamiyah and therefore affiliates of Al-Qaeda. If there is a next group in next year or 2 years from now, we think they will claim to be members of that. Now, having said that, there are certain areas that we discourage people from being tourists. But in general, the Philippines is safe. We cannot rule out the possibility of lone wolf terrorists. Lone wolf terrorists, by definition, do not exist in anybody's database. They may be radicalized by the internet, and it's only the person radicalizing them and themselves who know that they have been radicalized. The knowledge on how to construct bombs also exists on the internet. So the Philippines has no greater threat than any other country when it comes to lone wolf terrorists. But having said that, our intelligence services, our law enforcement entities are constantly upgrading their skills, are constantly exchanging information with relevant countries to be able to minimize further the threat that exists. So I have to restate, claiming to be IS and being IS are two different things. We think, to a large degree, this is more an attempt to gain resources rather to being followers of that ideology. In the peace process, our House of Representatives, where the current law on the basic law on the Bangsamoro is being tackled, promised us even before the incident in Mamasapano that they expected to pass the measure by June, and they are on schedule. They are now actually engaged in plenary debates. The Senate will follow suit. And so we are, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as our people are concerned, we still are experiencing what was promised by our legislature as far as their ability to pass this particular measure. Okay. The incident was a bump. It was tragic, but it hasn't stopped the process. But because at the end of the day, all of us Filipinos want peace in Mindanao. Once peace is achieved, and even now that we are just talking about the attainment of this basic law, there is already a growth in economic activity, which brings about a lot of more opportunities for those who were so disenchanted that made them decide to secede. Now they see the fruits of peace. Once the law is signed, once the new governance is in place, that will accelerate. More and more will rejoin society and will shun away those who are espousing secession or rebellion or brigandry. So I am pushing both the lower and the upper houses of our legislature to pass the law as soon as possible, because this has to be ratified in a plebiscite by our people, and to maximize the effects of the new governance prior to our elections next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question, please. From Hong Kong SAT, my name is Ki. I have a question to President Aquino. On the Philippines, you have joined the AIIB. So, let's just say,
we haven't joined the AIIB. We are, I understand from June to December this year, we are being invited. We are considering, we are studying whether or not to join the AIIB. But at this point in time, we haven't joined the AIIB.
From Kyodo News, my name is Deguchi. This year, we are celebrating the 70th anniversary of ending of the World War II. So soon, Prime Minister Abe will come up his statement. So, will apology be included or not is the focus of attention these days. So, President Aquino, do you also expect to have those kind of expression to be included in Prime Minister Abe's statement? And if apology is not included, the Filipino people would have been sacrificed, have been victims in many cases of the World War II. What may be the reaction? What may be the emotions and feelings?
I would not want to presume as to what the Prime Minister will be doing. My mother had a phrase before, or had a statement before, wherein she said she's not soliciting, or she does not favor unsolicited advice. So the Prime Minister did not ask me what should be in his statement. I shouldn't be talking about what his statement should be. Having said that, he has done right in so many instances, in so many different fora. We expect that he will do right again by this statement on the commemoration of the ending of the war, on the 70th commemoration of the ending of World War II.
Thank you very much. The next question, please.
よろしいですか。はい。
Yes, please.
はい、ジャーナリストの竹内。
My name is Takeuchi. I am a journalist about development, AIIB. It is a follow-up question. ASEAN, including the Philippines, the intention sounds like you wish to join, but it has not been decided. There are other matters that are to be considered. Through interviews about the governance structure of AIIB, there is an interest on your side, specifically, concretely, regarding the format of AIIB. If you have, what are the concerns and expectations? Can you tell us on both sides your expectations or concerns, if you have any, please?
The Philippines, like many other countries, needs a lot of infrastructure, and having access to a facility that will accelerate our attainment of the infrastructure is desirable. Having said that, shall we say that there has been an experience between China and the Philippines with regards to a concessional loan that did not produce the anticipated results. So we are very curious about the governance issue. We would like to see a certainty that the decisions in evaluating projects and the conditions of undertaking loans will be insulated from politics. And that I think is very essential, because at the end of the day, if we enter into an agreement, it should be clearly redound to the benefit of our people and not put them in a situation that might make the situation worse. So given our recent past experience, we really have to be very thorough in our study so as to ensure that our people are getting the best possible service that we pledge to them.
Sasaki from Asahi Shimbun. Now, I have a question on security issue, public security issue. Japan and Philippines now have deepened exchanges. But for last year, in 12 months, 7 Japanese that have been killed in the Philippines. So about the public security, do you have any policy to drastically change your public security? Do you have any the plan to strengthen your gun regulations?
That is news to me, that 7 Japanese were killed last year. I'm not aware of this particular situation. I will have to consult my Secretary of the Interior Local Government and the Chief of the Philippine National Police. I am supposed to have been apprised of all important developments within the country. If we can secure your card, then we will give you an answer by tomorrow as to exactly what the developments are. But having said that, the Secretary of Interior and Local Government has just shown me statistics wherein there is a very dramatic reduction in crime statistics for the Philippines, especially in the National Capital Region. There is a new law in place with regards to gun ownership that is supposed to address all of the deficiencies of the older law. It's supposed to make penalties even harder. It's supposed to ensure that enforcement of the relevant gun laws is more efficient, so as to prevent them from going into the hands of people who are not authorized to do so. We admit that there are kidnapping problems, for instance, for some Europeans, some Koreans, some Malaysians. That is in my knowledge base right now. I'm curious as to the Japanese, and hopefully I will even have information before I leave Japan, because this is something really new to me. And again, if we can have your business card so we can give you a reply at the latest by tomorrow. Thank you.
どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Mr. President, I'm Michio Ishida with Channel News Asia of Singapore. My question is related to the history of war. You have been quite forgiving towards Japan, towards what it did during World War II, but there are East Asian neighbors that are creating, well, the relationships are not very good still, 70 years after war. Is there any advice you can give to Japan to resolve this rift between the East Asian neighbors regarding war? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm, I guess, middle-aged, and we Asians normally reserve giving advice to those who are a lot elder than us. But having said that, there was a movie I saw as a young man, starring Richard Burton and Richard Harris, called The Wild Geese. And in this story, there was a band of mercenaries who were rescuing a deposed popular president in an African country. And in one scene, an actor by the name of Hardy Kruger, who portrayed a South African citizen, was tasked to carry this black, deposed, popular African president. And he used a term that was nothing to him, but symptomatic of the apartheid regime. And at the post, they had a discussion. The deposed African president said to him, we have to forgive you about the past. You have to forgive us about the present, or together we have no future. And that made a mark on me when I was in my teens. And of course, I viewed all of the films with regards to Japan's atrocities in World War II, especially those made during the war, where bigotry, a lot of bias happened. As we grow older, we get to see the other side of the coin, and perhaps they were not as, how shall I put it, perhaps the portrayal was too extreme in certain instances and unwarranted. Perhaps they're not the absolute villains that was portrayed right after the war. And perhaps we abused them in a sense after the war, being victors. Now, having said that, I think everybody wants to, in a sense, move forward. And all I'm saying is, in the Philippine example, they had obligations to us in form of reparations, which they paid, and if I understand correctly, have paid completely. Beyond the reparations, they have constantly helped us to address our concerns, whether it's disaster preparedness, whether it's risk reduction for disasters, whether it's helping our countrymen in the Bangsamoro prepare, since 2006, to prepare for more economic opportunities coming their way. Currently, after the great Eastern earthquake here, we had an earthquake inventory in the Philippines. We found out that some of our infrastructure, or a lot of our infrastructure, were no longer compliant with the building code. 2 major bridges in the National Capital Region are going to be funded with Japanese assistance, so the safety of our people are enhanced. And it has been done without too much fanfare. It has been done consistently. It has been done even when their partners in our government were less than scrupulous and honest. So if there were atrocities done in the Philippines, no? And at the same time, after that, there is a lot of kindness also done. And we want to foster even more of this kindness and this good relationship between the countries, because we really believe that if we partner towards the good, then we can advance to the state that we want to get to sooner rather than later. And that seems to be my duty to my people. And I think a lot of our people also see that. So for 59 years since we established or re-established since we established relations with Japan, they have been improving as their capacities have improving, as their ability to be friends or to demonstrate the friendship and support. and regardless of the conditions emanating at home. When Haiyan struck, I'm sure they were the first 5 to declare and send assistance. About 1,000 of their self-defense forces were sent right away. America, of course, was also there, Indonesia. In fact, I think they were the first 3. Probably the first 5 would include New Zealand and Australia. And I apologize if I made a mistake in the chronology, but there's so much help. So, again, going back, good to remember the past. Good to remember what it was when the relationships were not positive. Then perhaps we should also remember that we should do everything we can to avoid having the repeat of that tragedy. And if the relationship has transformed into one of support and friendship, doesn't it behoove us to make sure that it continues on that track and better everybody's lives? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe we have run out of time, so I would like to have to do away with all the other questions. And His Excellency has given his signature and the message whilst he was in the waiting room. So let me introduce what he has written.
Elaborate amidst the support of true, loyal, and indispensable friends. 人生のいろいろ難しい問題は真の忠実で。
So he has been translating your message. So this is a message from His Excellency. Now, 29 years ago, let me show you the message from his mother, the President Corazon Aquino. This was her message when she was here at the press club.
Many thanks, dear Lord. 苦しみと悲しみの中でも
He is now translating the message.
孫に感謝しますと。1986年11
In 1986, November 13th, the signature is given. So lastly, I would like to present a small memento, a fountain pen from the club. A big applause, please.